At the same time, we had a viral moment, Crystal, schooling some people on the Bill Maher real-time experience.
Somehow nobody gets upset about the rich people who got tons of money and tons of support, way more than working class people did.
Sure
but
they
oh
do.
my God, people were able to feed their kids and they had a little bit of money in their bank accounts. It was the worst thing in the world.
Crystal Ball, who is the co-host of Breaking Points and Crystal Kyle and Friends, was on Real Time with Bill Maher and did a fantastic job. Absolutely fantastic.
But how about the trillions that the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street? For some reason, people don't get upset about that.
How much?
And that fueled the trillions of dollars the Federal Reserve shot at Wall Street to backstop the stock market and the bond market. No one gets upset about that, even though that was a massive
I don't know what
factor in
you're talking
inflation.
about. What do you mean shot at Wall Street? When are we talking about?
We're talking about buying assets, buying stocks, buying bonds, buying treasury bills so that they expand the balance sheet. This is during the crisis, the coronavirus crisis. When the stock market crashed, that is what the Fed did. They went into action. They shot trillions of dollars.
But the stock market didn't crash during COVID.
Now it's crashing.
It did
it's crashing now.
It crashed, and the Fed came in and backstopped it. That's what happened.
What, it crashed and we never heard about it?
No, it crashed. Go back and look at it.
I think
it fell off a cliff.
Teed them. Yeah.
3-6.
Right.
Okay, yeah, there it is. That is, and why did it creep up by the time you get to like mid-April? Because the Fed stepped in with guaranteed money from the Treasury, and bingo bango, and all these crappy loans are fine. Everybody's over leveraged.
It was
it's fine.
unprecedented in terms of what the steps that the Fed took
talking about?
here.
Unprecedented. What are you like, shot? What are you talking about?
For a man who's so concerned about government spending, he has no idea that during the height of the pandemic, I'm just going to read from a PBS article, Bill Maher. Okay, Federal Reserve to lend additional $1 trillion a day to large banks. March 20th, 2020. You're telling me in March 20th, 2020, you weren't watching the fucking news at all, Bill Maher? Okay.
Go back and look at it.
I think
it fell off a cliff. The Treasury bond market stopped functioning, and the Fed took extraordinary action it's never taken in history.
I don't
Somehow
remember
no one
that.
gets upset.
The first week of
Somehow nobody gets upset about the rich people who got tons of money and tons of support, way more than working class people did.
Sure
but
they do.
my God, people were able to feed their kids and they had a little bit of money in their bank accounts. It was the worst thing in the world.
No.
That is one small part of the inflation story. And it is, by the way, not the only thing that we can deal with to get out of this mess.
Hey, happy Juneteenth, everybody. It's actually June 20th, 2022 at approximately, looks like it's about 20 to 1 p.m. my time. God, it was a crazy weekend. Something took place on Friday night in which was very close to home. So many of you might be aware, of course you are, if you've tuned in or subscribed to Patrick Lovell, Truth Bombs the Con, or hashtag Patrick Lovell, I can't even pronounce my last name, or hashtag the Con. And, one of the first things you'll see on, our videos was my appearance on Crystal Ball and, quite frankly, Kyle Kaliski. So there's a podcast that they do video. It's been going on for about a year. Crystal Ball is pretty well known, particularly in the internet sphere, if that's what we call it. And she came out of MSNBC originally. And interestingly enough, she was actually working with Dylan Ratigan years ago. And I find that interesting because my first movie, I actually interviewed Dylan Ratigan for our film because he had such a prolific outburst on live television not too much longer after the 2008 great financial crisis.
And I'm going to go to the people of the United States and I'm going to say, you've got to block Congress. And until we get rid of the block Congress, which is Jimmy Williams' constant point, which is get the money out of politics, and until a president says that's the problem and says he's going to fix it, there is no policy that I can possibly see, no matter how brilliant your idea may be, or your idea, or my idea, or her idea, or your idea at home, is that idea will not happen as long as there's the capacity to basically fire a politician who disagrees with me by taking funding away from him. Is that a fair assessment?
Dylan Ratigan, inspired me to go on the journey that I did, making a film called Forward 13, which was prologue and created The Con. Again, www.thecon.tv, which is more relevant today than I think at any other time in this insanely wild ride, if you will, in Epic Odyssey. So Crystal Ball appears on Bill Maher. And they're having this conversation, typical Bill Maher kind of interaction. It kind of bounces around between here and there. But Crystal Ball makes this point about, they're talking about inflation, they're talking about oil prices, they're talking about kind of the potpourri of everything that's on everyone's mind. And but Crystal says this thing, which is extremely important. She's like, I don't get why we seem to go ballistic over whatever, sort of, let's call it stimulus that went to the broader economy, that Bill Maher was tapped into and made the point that, we spent $6 trillion during COVID, to basically prop up, I don't know, several hundred million Americans, during a time when the entire economy came to a standstill because of the pandemic. And, she made the prescient point, which was the right point. She said, well, why are we flipping out about this in context to the trillions upon trillions of dollars that we've provided to Wall Street? And she was specifically talking about, the meltdown of 2020 and, what the Federal Reserve did. And she said kind of incorrectly that, it was the only time we've ever done this in history and it was the biggest in scope and everything else. And it was just simply a continuation of what we show in the con, which is the whole point, which in 2009, I continue to tell you that we created $29 trillion in emergency stimulus under the Federal Reserve Act 13.3 under exigent circumstances to basically prop up global economies because the 2008 financial crisis completely tanked the global markets, all based on fraud, which again is unpacked in specific detail, step by step, of what they actually did in the world's largest criminal conspiracy and cover-up that never ended. And then suddenly she makes this point based on something that took place in May, or I should say in March of 2020, and out of the blue, Bill Maher just kind of says, "What are you talking about?" I mean, nobody knows. I mean, he started making these claims that were like, nobody knows. What are you first of all talking about? The stock market didn't crash. I mean, it's just like, what? This is coming out of left field, like almost as if she was making it up. And kudos to Crystal, she stayed on point. And then, of course, the discussion kind of went all over the map, but it stayed on point long enough to create something that went viral over the weekend. And literally, now we've got a video that has been seen by, at least this morning, over 4 million views on Twitter alone. And from what I've seen on YouTube and some others and other people that have picked up on this, I think we're, way north of that. In terms of people that are tapping into this, because people are now starting to wise up to the fact that, hey, wait a second, we're going to blame regular people who got jobs after COVID, and maybe some stimulus during COVID for hyperinflation that's got an iron grip on everybody around the world. I mean, the cost of oil skyrocketing, the cost of really everything, consumption is skyrocketing, which I've been talking about quite a bit recently. And Bill Maher, a guy who gets paid a shit ton of money, who talks to a lot of people on a national, platform that probably reaches millions upon millions of people, had no idea what Crystal was talking about. And it was like, for me, really one of the most amazing things I've ever experienced from this standpoint, because, as I continue to drop these truth bombs on you, as I quite frankly drop truth bombs on Crystal and Sagar, both of whom, the first time my partner Eric and I, the filmmakers that made The Con, we appeared on Breaking Points with Crystal and Sagar when we first launched The Con in 2020.
We deconstruct the methodology of this madness and we connect it to the corner offices of Wall Street, and it's insane. And so a lot of people think, right, well, wait a second, this was a story that happened 12 years ago. No, it's a story that's happening now. What they got away with then is what led to what we're dealing with now. And it wasn't a $750 billion TARP package that Wall Street paid back. It was a $29 trillion transfer of wealth built on a conspiracy of lies.
And it was like, I basically illustrated in a very short period of time, what constituted this giant $29 trillion fucking backstop by the Federal Reserve that basically bought toxic assets that were criminally produced, that are on display in The Con, www.thecon.tv. And Crystal and Sagar, especially Sagar, was kind of like, what are you talking about? And you could kind of see it, but it was a short, segment, and they never really understood it. And then for whatever reason, a year and a half later, because of my relationship with one of the greatest authors of our time, a guy who is the all-time American expert on populism and populist movements, he made a phone call to Crystal, and she was putting together this new show with Kyle Kaliski, and they invited me on. And ironically, Eric and I landed between Russell Brand, who was right before us, and then David Sirota, Everybody knows who Russell Brand is, but if you don't know who David Sirota is, he was the co-writer of Don't Look Up. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards. He worked with, Adam McKay, who did The Big Short. And here I am, right, in the confluence of all of this stuff, and I'm trying to get a hold of Russell Brand to tell him the knowledge that we have. And then I was, really, up in David Sirota's face for like the last several months. Like, dude, you seemingly are on the right side of this. You made Don't Look Up. I've got so much freaking information that basically answers everything that Bill Maher had no idea about. And so I guess the long and the short of it is, if Bill Maher is in that position and doesn't know what's going on, it's crystal clear to me tens of millions of people don't have a freaking clue. And it's because of our overwhelming dystopia. We've got so much information that flies at us, and most of it's wrong, and nobody knows what's going on. Meanwhile, the elephant in the room, the centrifugal force of everything, is this monumental fraud backstopped by the Federal Reserve that bought toxic assets from Wall Street, guaranteed it 100 cents on the dollar starting in 2009 all the way through basically now, in which we gave at least, based on my numbers, at least 50 trillion to Wall Street. There's 1,000 billion in a trillion. I think if you stacked one $1 bill on top of each other, a billion would get you to the moon and back. That's how many trillions we spent to backstop all of this fucking criminal activity. And ultimately, I mean, this criminal activity that led to tens of millions of people basically being foreclosed upon, or they blew up their foreclosed upon illegally. And that's another aspect of the con. I mean, that the judiciary understood that got paid by the system to do it. They just basically whitewash the whole thing. They bulldoze people. They throw them in the streets. They destroy their lives. Tens of thousands of divorces and deaths by suicide, and now homelessness and everything else. And this has been going on for 13 years. And Bill Maher basically goes, "What are you talking about?" So what can I say? What can I tell you? I mean, people, listen, the con has the answers the entire world has missed. And it's because we covered it up. The Obama administration covered it up first. They kicked the can down the road, and then Fed policy has been doing this ever since. You want details? I can provide you details. Check me out on YouTube. Check me out on Facebook. Check me out on Twitter. I've got it all. And I've got even more. And I'm actually talking to one of the biggest celebrities in the world that could potentially voice what we're doing that would stop the world dead in its tracks if he comes to fruition. I don't know if he is, because he gets paid by the system too. It's a lot of maneuvering in and out. But I mean, I said this on Twitter yesterday, and I mean it. It's like watching this stuff from my perspective is watching the Emperor's New Clothes on really bad acid. I mean, you can't make this shit up. The largest crime in the criminal syndicate that's global in the history of the world has been able to get away with it this long because nobody has presented the truth to the millions upon millions of people that need to A, understand it, and B, are desperate for it. That's the whole point of what's going on with this crystal ball situation going viral. And all I can say is that we've got the answers the world is looking for. Check out The Con at www.thecon.tv. Please like and subscribe to Patrick Lovell Truth Bombs The Con on YouTube. Connect with me on Twitter. Connect with me on Facebook. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Connect with me on Instagram. Whatever the case is, we've got these goddamn answers. We've got to somehow elevate this over the walls of dystopia, where these people that are in positions that reach millions of people who can't tell you the truth or aren't willing to tell you the truth or some combination thereof. You've got to see it to believe it, because it's not that complicated. It's not rocket science. It's racketeering. It's racketeering by CEOs of the largest financial apparatuses in the world. And all it means really is that the whole system's rigged. The guys are in control, have all the power. They continue to loot and steal trillions of dollars, and then they blame it on you. Are you going to let them get away with it? Don't. I've already done the work, and I've got the evidence, and I've got the access to the guys at the FBI, the DOJ, the SEC, AGs. If we had tens of millions of people literally demonstrating in Washington, D.C., on the Washington Mall, and we surrounded the Federal Reserve and the Department of Justice, trust me, we change history. Join me. Onwards and upwards.